Hello and welcome back, adventurers. Get comfy as we delve deep into the violent history of Invidia, governed by the passions of its people and the ruthless brutality of its rulers. The seminal event that brought Invidia through the mists came in the year 603 per Raven calendar, the year Bacchus, known to history as the Traitor King, came to power. His rule was known by the animal savagery he exhibited. His downfall came in the form of a peasant girl, Marta, to whom Bacchus took a fancy when his hunting party passed through her village. As he had done dozens of times in the past, Bacchus ordered his soldiers to seize the girl, but when they arrived, Marta's lover Carlos, as well as her father and brother, resisted, killing an Invidian soldier. In retaliation, Bacchus ordered the entire village erased and its citizens crucified. That night, only Carlos survived and swore vengeance against Bacchus, gathering an army of outlaws and eventually attacking King's castle north of Carina. Unfortunately, Bacchus was ready for him. The outlaws were put to flight and Carlos was captured. Bacchus dragged both the young rebel and Marta to his dungeon, where he tortured and pushed them into a bloody pit filled with ravenous rabid wolves. As she was dying, Marta fixed Bacchus with a hate-filled stare and, as famously told in Invidian legend, uttered a curse for ever gifting the Traitor King with lycanthropy. That night, a strange mist descending upon the land, taking the entire kingdom in its cold embrace. The next full moon, Bacchus took to his bed with a blinding headache, and he awoke alone to find his entire castle awash in blood, with ravaged corpses of his servants, counselors, and family. Horrified, Bacchus remembered Marta's curse and touched his own face, only to find his fingers red with congealed blood. The curse had transformed the Traitor King into a bloodthirsty werewolf, and very likely the first dreadlord at Invidia's heart. From that day onward, Bacchus' rule grew harsher. He implored new guards and consulars and bade them bring peasants to him to feed his insatiable bloodlust. Within years, pleasure and violence became indistinguishable to the cursed lord. Bacchus' rule continued for a century and a quarter, ending abruptly at the hands of the most unlikely of saviors, a half-Vistani girl named Gabielle Adere. Born around 710 Raven calendar, Gabielle was the daughter of Isabella, a Vistani woman and a Falconian nobleman who kept her mother as a captive. Escaping with her daughter, Isabella wandered the realms, making a living with fortune-telling, petty larceny and begging. After Isabella was slain by a murderous werewolf in 729, or by some accounts was left to die by Gabielle, young Vistani was transported to Invidia, where the Lord Bacchus' troops found her. As the Traitor King approached her, Gabielle fixed him with a fearful gaze, and Bacchus froze in terror, seeing the same look of hatred that Marta had given him years before. Gabielle drew a hidden silver dagger and plunged it into Bacchus' throat. It is said that every wolf in Invidia uttered a fearsome howl at Bacchus' death. Proclaimed queen by the grateful rebels, Gabielle claimed the castle Lupet for herself and settled into rulership, but soon grew as lax as uncaring as Bacchus had been brutal and repressive. She amused herself with lavish entertainment and took many lovers, while the peasants were abandoned to go their own way. Within a decade of Bacchus' demise, Invidia has degenerated into an anarchic realm with little, if any, central authority. Gabielle was driven by boredom, anger at the failures of her past life, frustration at her mother's cursed legacy, and hatred of all the Vistani who had rejected Isabella and condemned them to a life of misery. In those days, the first persecutions began as Gabielle seized and imprisoned Vistani, punishing them harshly for the most minor of crimes. Though brutal, Gabielle's actions were nothing compared to what was to come. Queen Gabielle was soon forgotten and all but replaced in the commoners' minds by the witch Adere. In 736 Raven calendar, Duke Gundar of Gundarak was assassinated by Dr. Henrik Dominiani, warden of an asylum near Teufeldorf. Gundarak plunged into chaos, and Strad von Zarvich ordered his boyars to annex the realm. As Raven armies struck deep into Gundarak, Adere occupied Gundarak's western regions, facing surprisingly little resistance from the Gundrakites, and had taken Castle Hunadora. The end of Gabielle's reign began when a handsome, dark-eyed gentleman caller appeared at the gates of the Castle Lupet and immediately swept Gabielle off her feet. The two spent the night together, after which the stranger vanished and Gabielle discovered that she was pregnant. Adere's son Malocchio was born the next spring, seemingly normal save for the sixth finger on each hand. Gabielle's divinatory gifts revealed that her progeny was actually a Dukar, a legendary anti-messiah destined to bring death and despair to all the Vistani. Gabielle was at first happy with the turn of the events, for her hatred of her mother's people had grown even blacker and more ferocious over time. She began to plan a future for her son. a future that would see the final destruction of the Vistani at his hands. However, her son had no intention of serving as her puppet. Slowly, he turned the tables on his mother, corrupting her servants, buying her lovers, restricting her movements about the land, and eventually imprisoning her in her own mansion. Events came to a head during Karina's Harvest Carnival in 747. Malokio had now reached adulthood, and his mother was no longer useful to him. But the emergence of the new Udukar had not gone unnoticed by the Vistani, who wove a powerful incantation to forever bind Malokio's evil to his homeland. His plans thwarted, Malokio vented his rage upon his mother, fraying her sanity and leading her into the hands of her enemies. Gabrielle's life was spared only through the direct intervention of her spurned lover Maten, Cardican Bard and Wolverine. While Malokio there announced his emergence to the world and used his mother's resources to seize control of Invidia, Maten spent months in hiding, slowly nursing Gabrielle's mind and body back to health, and together the pair plotted Malokio's downfall. Maten journeyed to Cardigas, where he began to recruit woodsmen, Wolverites by some accounts, to his cause. Meanwhile, Gabielle found her way to the Ducal Forest and made contact with the Gundrakite rebels. As the Gundrakites in Invidia had generally been well treated, the rebels accepted her as a figurehead leader, and by mid-750s they were strong enough to storm and hold Castle Hunadora. Defeated by the rebels, Malokio launched murderous pogroms against the Vistani with even greater zest and hatred than his mother. One strange facet of the anti-Vistani movement stands out. Other than the magic that binds him, Malokio seems neither afraid or not affected by the wrath of the Vistani, despite the many dying or wronged gypsies who curse his names with all the venom they could muster. Vistani curses, feared throughout the land of the mists, appear to be totally powerless against the Dukar. To bolster his forces, Malokio spent much of his resources to draw mercenaries from across the core, and soon thereafter brokered an alliance with Vlad Drakov. The alliance brought an influx of Falconian soldiers, bolstering Invidia's army and providing Malokio with sufficient troops to contemplate action against the Gundrakite rebels and disliked neighbors. In 748, the Gundrakites of Borovia came under the leadership of the young and charismatic separatist Ardong Zarieza. A master strategist and talented propagandist, he wove tales of an ancient, idealized Gundrak that never existed. Slowly, the Gundrakites of Borovia rallied to Ardong's banner, and the rebels of Invidia, seeing the Ardong the leader they so desperately needed, talking of joining with him in a grand alliance for the Gundrakite independence. Clearly, this was a situation that Gabrielle would have to nip in the bud, lest her army of retribution be taken away from her, along with her best chance at a return to power. She presented herself to Ardong Zarieza when the Great Liberator visited Castle Hunadora, and within a few days the Gundrakite Messiah openly endorsed her leadership of the Invidian rebel forces. Several rebels offered their suspicions that Ardong and the Invidian witch were secretly involved in a passionate affair, and that she had gained his allegiance by placing him under her spell. Should this be the case, Gabrielle maintained a delicate balancing act for several years, continuing beneath the noses of her two oblivious lovers. Both Adaras have recently suffered setbacks. After a year of saber-rattling and escalating tempers, Malokio sensed frailty in Civica's as ruler and amassed a mercenary army in 752 Barovian calendar. He ordered his army across Civican border that autumn, with orders to seize Castle Nedregard and put the ruler to the sword. What occurred at the castle remains poorly understood in these lands. All that is widely known is that this battle somehow sparked the infamous Night of Screaming Shadows. The Black Rose of Civicus was slain, his castle shattered, and not a single Invidian soldier present at the siege was left to tell the tale. The troubles that befell Gabrielle in 753 were less epic, though they may prove scarcely less catastrophic. Gabrielle discovered herself to be pregnant again, and her daughter Lucita was born later in the year. Gabrielle has never spoken publicly about the father of this child, though disgruntled rebel Sassatius told both Maten and Ardong that they fathered the child. When the truth is revealed, she will lose one of her lovers and the allegiance of the man's forces. Today, Invidia hangs in a precarious state of balance. Malokio's persecution of the Vistani has reached new heights of cruelty and fanaticism. His troops pursue fleeing Vistani across the frontiers into foreign lands. In Borovia, Count Strahd's own forces have intervened, enforcing the Count's edict that no Vistani in his realm to be harmed. Likewise, Malokio has enraged Ivan Delisnia, who recently decreed that Invidian troops on his soil will be attacked and demanded that this pursuit cease. Gabrielle's rebellion hangs by a thread. She supposedly considered sending Maten, Ardong, or both in a direct assault against Malokio, a fight in which they will certainly perish. Other rumors claim that she has considered taking her daughter and fleeing, traveling the realms as her mother did, passing the pain and tragedy of her past onto another generation. Thank you so much for your time, patient listeners. Invidian history is bloody and tangled. If the domain's people are to be saved, the heroes will have to choose the side of one of their darers, and I hope they choose wisely. But for now, as always, be careful while crossing the mists.